A new Russian missile is sending shockwaves through Western defense circles. Known as Oreshnik, it could fundamentally alter the military balance between Russia and NATO and even place the US mainland within range of a non-nuclear strike. Introduced into service in December 2025, Russia's Oreshnik ballistic missile is the first intermediate-range missile deployed in Europe since the 1980s. Western analysts say the weapon has already been combat-tested twice in Ukraine, first in late 2024 and again on January 8th when it was used in a major show of force near Ukraine's western border in the Lviv region. Recent Western assessments now suggest the missile's range could be as high as 5,500 kilometers, far beyond earlier estimates. That range would allow Oreshnik, if launched from Russia's Arctic regions, to strike targets as far away as Washington, D.C., Chicago, and other major U.S. cities. What makes Oreshnik especially significant is its payload. Unlike intercontinental ballistic missiles, which carry only nuclear warheads, Oreshnik can be armed with conventional weapons, giving Russia its first conventional strike capability against the US mainland. Each missile carries 6 hypersonic glide vehicles capable of maneuvering at extreme speeds, making them exceptionally difficult to intercept. Until now, Russia's non-nuclear strike options against the US were limited to slower cruise missiles launched from submarines or bombers. Oreshnik changes that equation. Potential targets could include high-value US military and industrial sites, air bases, bomber fleets, and major defense production facilities. With Oreshnik now operational, analysts warn this marks a new era of mutual vulnerability, one that raises fresh questions about deterrence, escalation, and the future of global strategic stability. A Russian Navy warship is escorting sanctioned cargo vessels through waters near NATO's southern flank. The ships say they are heading for Egypt, but their past routes tell a different story. Days earlier, the US seized a similar Russian-linked tanker despite military shadowing. Now Moscow appears to be testing how far its naval protection can go. On January 9th, open-source analysts spotted a Russian Navy destroyer south of Portugal. The warship, Severomorsk, was escorting 2 sanctioned cargo vessels, Sparta 4 and Mais Jelenia. Such direct naval escort is rare for civilian shipping in these waters. Its presence immediately raised questions about what these ships are carrying and where they are really going. Officially, both cargo vessels declared Port Said, Egypt as their destination, but historical tracking data tells another story. Sparta 4 has repeatedly declared Egypt, only to continue onward to Russia's naval base in Tartus, Syria. The movement of Mais Jelenia hints at possible docking in Libya, though nothing is confirmed. The escorting destroyer Severomorsk is an anti-submarine warfare ship from Russia's Northern Fleet. Commissioned during the Cold War, it carries advanced weapons and sensors. Its mission here suggests the cargo is strategic, military, logistical, or politically sensitive. Russia usually does not deploy this level of protection without reason. Both cargo vessels are tied to companies under Western sanctions. Sparta 4 is operated by a firm linked directly to Russia's Ministry of Defense logistics network. Mais Jelenia is connected to sanctioned firms supporting Arctic energy and infrastructure projects. Together, they form part of Russia's sanctioned supply chain operating overseas. This convoy appears just days after U.S. forces seized a Russian-linked oil tanker in the Caribbean. That vessel was part of Moscow's so-called shadow fleet, moving sanctioned oil. Despite being shadowed by Russian naval assets, it was still taken. Now Russia seems determined to ensure that does not happen again.
The world holds its breath as US-Russia tensions explode to unprecedented levels, pushing the 2 superpowers to the brink of a dangerous standoff. Every eye is on the North Atlantic, where a single move could have far-reaching consequences for global security. Moscow is seething. Russia has formally condemned the U.S. seizure of the Russian-flagged oil tanker Marinera, describing it as a blatant violation of international law and a direct challenge to its sovereignty. The Russian Transport Ministry confirmed the vessel was captured, while the Foreign Ministry warned Washington that the operation flagrantly disregards the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the international treaty guaranteeing freedom of navigation in global waters. Considering the incoming information regarding the presence of Russian citizens among the crew, we demand that the American side ensure their humane and dignified treatment, strictly respect their rights and interests, and not impede their speedy return to their homeland. Russian nationals are among the crew, the ministry stressed, and Moscow is watching every move closely. The message is unmistakable. Interference will not be tolerated. As global eyes turn to the North Atlantic, tensions are escalating, and the standoff between Washington and Moscow has entered a dangerously volatile chapter. In a high-stakes maritime showdown, the U.S. military confirmed it has seized control of a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the North Atlantic, an operation driven by alleged sanctions violations and carried out after weeks of silent surveillance and relentless pursuit across open seas. The vessel, MV Bella 1, also known as the Marinera, was seized under the authority of a warrant issued by a U.S. federal court, according to a statement by the U.S. Army's European Command. EUCOM said the tanker was intercepted after being tracked by the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Monroe, with the operation carried out in coordination with the U.S. Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and the newly renamed Department of War, formerly known as the Department of Defense. The command confirmed the seizure took place in international waters in the North Atlantic. U.S. officials say the Marinera is part of a so-called shadow fleet used to transport oil for sanctioned states, including Venezuela, Russia, and Iran. The tanker had reportedly evaded earlier attempts by the U.S. Coast Guard to board it in December, while it was operating in the Caribbean, and later crossed into the Atlantic Ocean. According to Reuters, the ship had slipped through a broader U.S. maritime blockade, targeting vessels carrying sanctioned Venezuelan oil. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth underscored the administration's stance in a social media post, writing that the blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world. Two U.S. officials told Reuters that both the Coast Guard and the U.S. military were directly involved in Wednesday's seizure. Russian state broadcaster RT reported that American forces boarded the vessel using a helicopter, publishing images of the aircraft hovering above the tanker. RT cited an unnamed source who said the ship had been shadowed by a U.S. Coast Guard vessel for weeks, and that at least one earlier attempt to intercept it was disrupted by severe weather conditions. As the operation unfolded, marine traffic data showed the Marinera edging closer to Iceland's exclusive economic zone, heightening the stakes by the hour. Reuters later reported that a Russian submarine and a naval warship were operating nearby, an ominous backdrop to the seizure, even as both sides stopped short of direct confrontation. Speaking from Moscow, journalist Dmitry Medvedenko described the pursuit as a prolonged cat-and-mouse game, noting that there had been multiple failed attempts to seize the tanker in recent weeks. The Russian government has not confirmed whether it deployed naval assets to escort the vessel, but Russia's foreign ministry said it was closely monitoring the situation. The ministry, quoted by Russian state media, argued that the tanker was operating lawfully in international waters and accused the U.S. and NATO of paying disproportionate attention to what it described as a civil vessel. Moscow called on Western nations to respect freedom of navigation under international maritime law.
The Marinera was sanctioned by Washington in 2024 for allegedly transporting oil on behalf of a company linked to Lebanon-based Hezbollah. U.S. authorities say the seizure is part of a wider crackdown ordered by President Donald Trump on vessels connected to Venezuelan oil exports. Separately, U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced that American forces also seized a second vessel, the Panama-flagged supertanker M. Sophia, in international waters near the Caribbean. Reuters reported that the ship had departed Venezuelan waters earlier this year and was operating with its transponder turned off while carrying oil toward China. Reporting from Washington, Al Jazeera correspondent Kimberly Hallcat described the dual seizures as a significant escalation, saying they signal a coordinated effort to intercept and detain multiple sanctioned vessels operating far beyond U.S. territorial waters.
Just today, our forces not deployed to the Caribbean seized a boat, a sanctioned boat tied to the IRGC that tried to flee from us. That happened somewhere else. We are constantly involved in action. We have boats in the Mediterranean, we have ships in the Middle East, we have ships in the Indo-Pacific. These ships, if they weren't in the Caribbean, they'd be somewhere else conducting activity. Yeah. That's what the Navy does.
I want to emphasize that question from CNN. The question's never asked how much does it cost when they're in the Mediterranean or the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean or the Pacific. But now that they're in our hemisphere, on a counter-cartel mission or ensuring that an indicted individual comes to justice, now you're asking the question of cost. It's a disingenuous question to begin with. You're trying to find any angle possible to undermine the success of one of the most historic military missions the world has ever seen. The level of sophistication that Senate just was briefed on, and the House was briefed on, a classified level, is something only the United States of America can accomplish. The world is taking notice of that. Certainly Venezuela is taking notice of that. And it continues because two oil tankers, two overnight, were seized by the United States of America, stateless or sanctioned, because the oil blockade, the quarantine of oil out of unsanctioned or stateless, sanctioned or stateless vessels continues. That leverage will continue as Secretary Rubio outlined. So our military is prepared to continue this. As he said, the president, when he speaks, he means it. He's not messing around. We are an administration of action to advance our interests, and that is on full display. We're happy to brief the House.
No. Two quick things. Okay, number one, because we have to go, because we got to brief the House, and if we don't and they're pissed at us, you guys better defend us. That was because we were talking to you. I would make one more point, and it's a very interesting point. One of those ships that was seized that had oil in the Caribbean, you know what the interim authorities are asking for in Venezuela? They want that oil that was seized to be part of this deal. They understand that the only way they can move oil and generate revenue and not have economic collapse is if they cooperate and work with the United States, and that's what we see are going to happen. We got to go talk to the House, guys.